end quote. Zaidan's literary history, too, incorporates many traces from the networks that the global finance has further reinforced. The references to Indian, Chinese, and Greek literatures in Zaidan's work point out a strong link between the commodities from different parts of the world that have entered Egypt and the Levant as a result of global trade, and literary traditions from different parts of the world that have entered Zaidan's history as a result of travels and interactions that this global trade has enabled. I propose that Tarikh Adab al-Lughra al-Arabiya, the history of Arabic language literature by George Zaidan, which was first serialized in the Al-Hilal journal in 1894 and 1895, and eventually published as a multi-volume work in 1911 and 1914, should be analyzed within this context of increasing circulations. Such a contextual shift demonstrates that Tarikh, which is often studied solely by scholars of Arabic literature, can be reassessed also as a work of comparative literature. This reassessment will shed light upon notions of the classical Arabic heritage that shape both Zaidan's work and the Arabic literature field to this day. Indeed, Tarikh played a crucial role in the formation of the Arabic literature field, especially because, as Michael Allen puts it, quote, to this day, Zaidan's historical understanding of Arabic literature remains a central influence on the formation of the Arabic literature discipline, as much for the methods he undertakes as for the meticulous cataloging of sources his work provides, end quote. The list of sources that Zaidan consulted for Tarikh reinforces my portrayal of him as a comparatist. One of these sources is a foundational text of the comparative literature discipline, Histoire de littérature comparée des origines au XXe siècle, a history of comparative literatures from the earliest times to the 20th century by Frédéric Lollier. Zaidan's work resonates with the comparative literature discipline of the 19th century, especially as it was developed by German and French scholars that compared literatures from different cultures of the world to pass judgments on how civilized they were. In a similar vein, Zaidan argues in the beginning of Tarikh that literary histories display the social and intellectual progress of a particular community vis-à-vis other civilizations. Many chapters in Zaidan's work begin with references to economic, social, and literary transformations in different parts of the world, including India, China, or Western Europe. This should come as no surprise, since the list of sources that Zaidan consulted includes histories of Chinese, Indian, French, and Greek literatures, such as Histoire de la littérature italienne, the history of Italian literature by François Perens, a literary history of Persia by Edward Granville Brown, and a literary history of India by Robert Watson Fraser. Similarly, he provides the names of libraries from different parts of the world in which the manuscripts that he used for his history were located, including the Ayasofya and Beyazıt libraries in Istanbul and the British Museum Library in London. The Arabic literature that Zaidan envisioned was a reservoir that incorporated many streams, including the writings that shaped the formation of not only European scholars of comparative literature, but also Ottoman Turkish intellectuals. The Arabic sources that Zaidan consulted include the 10th century masterpiece Al-Fihrist by Ibn al-Madini, as well as works that played a key role for the formation of Ottoman intellectuals, such as Kashf al-Zunun by Katip Çelebi, as well as Miftah es-Saada by Taşri Köprüzade Ahmed Efendi, which, as İlhan Kutluyer puts it, crystallizes the intellectual formation and philosophical worldview of the Ottoman intelligentsia. To further demonstrate the comparative side of Zaidan, I now analyze how Zaidan uses the term classics or classique in Tarikh. This term comes up twice in Zaidan's work, both in volume 2. In the first instance, he uses the term to describe how a style that became prevalent in the late Abbasid period was imitated by later generations. Quote, this era is distinguished by the full maturation of arts and sciences, including the composition of large lexicons and the establishment of a prose style that became the norm for the following centuries, a style that Europeans call, in their words, classics, end quote. Zaidan puts a quotation mark around the word classics here and uses the expression in their words, suggesting that this concept, which is a European, if French expression, is foreign to his audience. Zaidan indicates that although his audience may be unfamiliar with the concept classics, this concept can describe a particular style of Arabic literature. Furthermore, after noting that the prose writing achieved its golden age in the final years of the Abbasid Empire, Zaidan also writes, quote, "The prose writing of this age became the style that later generations took as a model to be pursued. It's the school of style that's called, in the words of Europeans, classics. In other words, the school of Arabic epistolography reached maturation in this age, just as the Roman prose style reached maturation in the age of Cicero and then started declining," end quote. Because the word classics is put in parentheses, this paragraph again suggests that the word classics is a concept that Zaidan's readers are not necessarily very familiar with. At the same time, Zaidan also emphasizes that even if Europeans and Arabs may have come up with different expressions to describe a particular style, they share similar historical trajectories. Zaidan notes that a European expression that may sound foreign to his reader actually captures the characteristics of a particular style of Arabic literature. Furthermore, he doesn't use parentheses or quotation marks when using the terms Nahw or grammar and Jahiliya, like pre-Islamic times, to describe certain aspects of Greek or French literatures throughout Tarikh. Indeed, Zaidan constantly emphasizes the similarities between Greeks and Arabs to show that Arabs, like Greeks, belong to an important civilization. He notes that both debated extensively about the talent of their poets, both share a period of Jahiliya, and both developed a science of grammar. Like Zaidan, many influential authors, such as Tawfiq al-Hakim and Taha Hussein, would frequently compare their communities with Greeks and Romans. In introduction to his Arabic translation of Iliad, Süleyman al-Bustani, who is considered by Wajih Fanus a comparatist due to his knowledge of several languages and extensive reflection on the issues of translation and literary influence, notes that the Greek language is close in terms of its essence to the Arabic language, what al-Bustani calls our language. Quote, "Greek poetry is composed in a language that closely captures the human essence, fitra, like our Arabic language, and closely scrutinizes a Jahiliya of people like ours. There is no community like our ancient poets whose works capture, in terms of wisdom and poetic description, the essence of Iliad." Unlike Zaidan, who almost never uses the phrase our literature or our language when writing about Arabic literature, the word our in this paragraph plays a key role here, since it projects languages and periods as important and clear markers of identity, as our language, our Jahiliya. I consider this comparison an example of trials that resulted from the increasing number of textual circulations in the late Ottoman Empire, which prepared the ground for new visions of culture and the eventual invention of Arabic literature. Tarek al-Aris has demonstrated that much of the scholarship on Arab modernity focuses on questions of borrowing and representation, hence considering modernity a European movement that was imitated by the Arab world. Al-Aris thus argues that critics should not study the modernity, but instead what he calls, quote, multiple trials of modernity, end quote, encounters, accidents, events, in which notions and values of modernity are negotiated and resignified. In a similar vein, I propose that the very invention of the idea of Arabic literature was forged via many trials of modernity that were staged in the contact space that included Arab, Turkish, and European thinkers and libraries of London, Istanbul, and Cairo. even if the interest in Greek and Roman civilizations waned among Arab intellectuals, I propose that critics consider the term classical, that's still widely used in the Arabic literature field, a consequence of textual circulations that catalyzed these trials in which Ottoman intellectuals engaged with works of world literature that were written in Turkish, Greek, or French. Eventually, classical Arabic becomes a foundational concept for the Arabic literature field. Consider the following verse by Abdul Muhsin Tahabbader on the emergence of modern Arabic poetry from his influential Tatawwur al-Riwaya al-Arabiya al-Haditha fi Misr, the evolution of modern Arabic novel in Egypt, as he writes about poets such as Mahmud Sami al-Barudi and Aisha al-Taymuriya. Quote, they did not write poetry to make their living and thus were able to engage with the original sources of Arabic poetry. Therefore, their influence in poetry was stronger and acuter. Their poetry represented the beginning of the classical direction in Arabic poetry, end quote. Badr does not use parentheses or quotation marks around the word classical, suggesting that the term now does not sound foreign to his readers. The classical in Badr's work refers less to a specific style or group of poets of a particular period and more to a stylistic inclination that can characterize even a modern poet's work. Zaidan uses the term classics to affirm a sense of affiliation between Arabs and other civilizations with a classical heritage. However, many Arabic histories that were written after Tariq no longer make such a comparison as they use the term classical. Understanding that the first articulations of the classical Arabic in modern Arabic literary history were instances of comparison would undermine the assumption that thinkers like Zaidan laid the foundation of an Arabic literature discipline that's being globalized only now as more scholars today compare Arabic texts with works from other literary traditions. Classical Arabic is the vestige that testifies to the discipline's global beginnings. Section 2, Namık Kemal and Arabic Literature. Suyong Kim notes that the incorporation of lands in which the majority spoke Arabic, Syria, Egypt, the Hijaz, Iraq, and much of the Maghreb, into the Ottoman domains in the 16th century played a key role in generating a cosmopolitan Ottoman culture whose universalist aspirations strive to subsume the major Islamic literary traditions, mainly Arabic, Persian, and Turkish. This further substantiates Muhsin al-Musawi's argument that many works that were composed in Arabic between 12th and 18th centuries should be situated within a transcultural network of what he calls, quote, an Islamic Republic of Letters, end quote, that corresponds to the wide geographical Spain that existed across Asia and Africa of the entire Muslim world. As he puts it, quote, Arabic was used and practiced since the mid-10th century in the shadow of world conquerors and non-Arab empires and dynasties, end quote, as leaders such as Timur could claim to become rulers of the world when they had, quote, knowledge of other tongues, especially Arabic, end quote. Thus, classical Arabic poetic heritage constituted an integral element of the Ottoman cultural reservoir that shaped intellectual formation of thinkers such as Namık Kemal. Part of the Arabic heritage, Turas, has thus attained a significant cultural capital among the Ottoman literati. Thus, the paradigm of a clash between the hegemonic imperial Turkish center and Arab periphery, which has significantly influenced the field of Ottoman studies, cannot capture the complex literary relations in the late Ottoman Empire. Namık Kemal indeed had a deep familiarity with what we today consider the classical Arabic tradition. In a treatise on literature that he wrote probably at the end of his life and yet never published or even gave a title, Namık Kemal quotes from Arab poets such as Al-Antara and Ibru al-Qais, Persian poets such as Hafez and Sadi, and Turkish poets such as Nedim. He considers works from Abu Ala al-Ma'ari and al-Mutanabbi the best examples of poems that display nuanced thought, and works from Imru al-Qais the best examples of poems that excel in depiction. Here, Namık Kemal considers himself a critic who can pass authoritative judgments on canonical works of Arabic poetry. He wants his readers to study the works of Imru al-Qais or al-Ma'ari to improve their literary skills, suggesting that the works of these authors should not be foreign to his audience. At the same time, Namık Kemal may not look like a master of Arabic poetry by modern standards. In the introduction of a in a modern edition of his treatise, the editor notes that Namık Kemal made numerous mistakes, especially when he quotes from Arabic and Persian poems. Onan, the editor, also notes that Namık Kemal consulted no books as he recited these poems from memory, and he did not bother to proofread the final version of this work. Because Namık Kemal is neither a native speaker of Arabic nor of Persian, critics may consider these mistakes the proof for a Turkish writer's juvenile attempt and ultimate failure to master the canons of, quote, foreign Arabic and Persian traditions. However, as predecessors of the classical Turkish poetry, classical Arabic and Persian poetry did not generate in Namık Kemal, to borrow from Harold Bloom, an anxiety of influence. I propose that Namık Kemal may have already considered these poets members of an Ottoman canon, since he writes down their works from memory and expresses no sense of deep cultural anxiety vis-à-vis them. The famous journal Al-Hilal, which was edited by George Zaydan, includes an article from an anonymous writer on Namık Kemal, which projects him as a pioneer of modern Turkish awakening, and yet provides little information on his engagement with the Arabic heritage that now seems to be under the purview of people like Zaydan, who are considered pioneers of a modern Arab identity. An analysis of this article suggests that Arabic writings on authors such as Namık Kemal, who are considered the pioneers of modern Turkish literature today, also contributed to the canonization of classical and modern Arabic literatures during the Nahda period. In the beginning of the article, Zaydan indicates that Al-Hilal has published an article on Mustafa Reşit Pasha and will publish more works on other famous Ottoman writers. Furthermore, akin to works that establish a sense of stark rupture between classical and modern Arabic literatures, the article on Namık Kemal posits a stark rupture between classical and modern Turkish literatures. The anonymous author notes that the Tasvir-i Esker newspaper initiated the modern Turkish Renaissance and Nahda et-Türkiye el-Haditha, and that Namık Kemal was the pioneer for a new Turkish prose style. The article overlooks the fact that Namık Kemal called for a new literature that would build upon works from poets such as al-Mutanabbi and al-Ma'ari. Furthermore, the article indicates that Turkish ballet, Al-Adab at Turkiye, entered a new age with Namık Kemal as prose branched into new directions, while Turkish authors before him showed no innovation in both their prose and their ideas for the last 600 years. This remark could have further reinforced the prevalent assumption that Arabic literature was undergoing a stark transformation in the 19th century. Once certain cultural transformations in the late Ottoman Empire, as described as, quote, the modern Turkish Nahda, end quote, the history of modern Turkish literature no longer describes a foreign, unfamiliar literary landscape, but could have served as a mirror image that further reinforced the idea among Arab readers that their literary history too had a similar narrative that was undergoing a stark rupture and its own Nahda. In this particular historiography that shapes both the article on Namık Kemal in Al-Hilal and the current scholarship, modern Arabic and Turkish literatures here have parallel trajectories that reflect each other and yet rarely, if ever, intersect at the interstitial milieu of the cosmopolitan Ottoman culture. Section 3. Notions of the classical heritage in late Ottoman writings. Some authors whom we today consider pioneers of modern Arabic literature read their works of their heritage to trust also during their time in Istanbul. Mahmud Sami al-Barudi, often recognized as one of the founders of Arab nationalism, worked as a civil administrator in Istanbul as he was publishing his first works of poetry that drew upon classical Arab authors such as Mutanabbi. Roger Allen notes that Misbah al-Sharq, the famous Arabic newspaper, which was founded by Muhammad al-Muwalihi in 1898, included, quote, extracts from Arabic literature, including essays of al-Jahid and poems of Abu Ala al-Ma'ari, which Muhammad had transcribed in Istanbul's Fatih Library during his stay there, end quote. One of the most prominent figures of Arab modernity, Ahmad Faris Ashidyak, also made extensive use of Arabic, Persian, and Turkish works in Istanbul. As Geoffrey Roper writes, quote, his assiduous work in the libraries of Europe and Turkey enabled him to study, appreciate, copy, and later edit great works of the Arabic literary heritage, many of which had not yet been published and had lapsed into obscurity in their homeland, end quote. Indeed, the section Literature Books of the inventory of the Hagia Sophia Library includes some of the most canonical works of classical Arabic literature, such as Zakt al-Sant by al-Ma'ari, al-Ijaz by al-Thalibi, Kitab al-Bayan wa al-Tabyin by al-Jahiz, and Diwan by Abu Tammam, and Diwan by Ibn al-Mubatta. It's also crucial to note that many Orientalists encountered what they considered classical masterpieces of Arabic literature in Istanbul's libraries. For example, Ruhi al-Khalidi notes that the prominent Orientalist Richard Boucher discovered the works of Al-Farazdak in the Hagia Sophia Library in Istanbul before providing a commentary on them and translating them into French. Furthermore, these pioneers also read these Arabic texts when many Ottoman Turkish intellectuals were categorizing these same works as their own classics. Just like many European writers in the 19th century who studied the Mediterranean as the basin of a Greco-Roman heritage that gave birth to the modern Western civilization, writers such as Ismail Hakkı too sought the roots of their civilization in Arabic and Persian works against a West that sought its roots in Greek and Roman works. Due to this search for roots, Arabic and Persian works became open to new significations as Turkish authors too were discovering the same Arab poets such as Mutanabbi, Abu Tammam, and Al-Farazdak as their own classics. Many prominent Turkish literary historians such as Ahmet Hamdi Tanpınar, Faik Reşat, and Mehmet Fuat Köprülü compared in their works the influence of Arabic on Ottoman Turkish intellectuals with the influence of ancient Greek and Roman authors on contemporary French or British writers. Thus, Ottoman literature could be resignified as Turkish literature and classical Arabic poetry as a source of influence that once shaped this literature but eventually can be set aside for the constitution of a new modern identity. The following words from İsmail Hakkı Eldem, one of the first Ottoman literary historians who used the term classics, demonstrate how literary histories maintain both a sense of distance and continuity vis-a-vis the past. Quote, just as gibi, classics started with Greeks and Romans for Western literature, it started with Arabic and Persian poets for our literature, end quote. The word gibi, which means like or just as in Turkish, suggests that the Ottoman literature is comparable with and similar or even equivalent to the Western literature. This sentence claims that just as the Western culture has its classics, so do the Ottomans. Literature becomes a possession that contributes to one sense of identity, as is evident in the use of the phrase our literature, bizim edebiyatımız. İsmail Hakkı's observation also generates a theological trajectory, since the Ottoman literature starts with Arab poets such as Mutanabbi and Abu Tammam for him. Implicit in this word choice is the fact that these poets are still considered a part of Ottoman literature, even if they are now seen as distant ancestors. İsmail Hakkı claims that the Ottoman literature starts with Arab and Persian poets rather than with Arabic and Persian literatures. This subtle and yet pivotal distinction suggests that İsmail Hakkı still does not categorize literatures based on ethno-linguistic grounds and considers Arab and Persian poets a part of what he calls our literature. While various Turkish histories categorize the entire Arabic literature as the classics of their literary heritage, Arabic literary histories such as Zaydan's Tarih categorize a particular a corpus of Arabic writing as the classics. Such a reclassification in both Arabic and Turkish writings stands for cultural negotiations that will eventually reinforce the current disciplinary divisions between the classical and the modern, as well as among Arabic, Turkish, and Persian literatures in the study of Middle Eastern literatures. Undermining these divisions can generate more nuanced perspectives on authors such as Ayşe Teymuriye or Ayşe At-Taymuriya, who composed poems in Arabic, Turkish, and Persian, and Fuzuli, who composed works in Arabic and yet has received not enough attention from scholars of Arabic literature because he's often canonized in works of classical Ottoman Turkish poetry. While they have been usually studied within the context of their national communities only, my talk has reframed Arabic and Turkish literary histories that were written in the 19th and early 20th century within the context of both an Ottoman cultural milieu and the comparative literature scholarship that took shape in the 19th century. I have thus demonstrated that the history of modern Arabic literature and the classical Arabic literature that this modern literature defined itself against cannot be written apart from debates on language, literature, and heritage in Ottoman Turkish writings. This reframing has important implications also for the broad literature studies, which is becoming one of the most prominent fields in humanities and especially comparative literature. World literature examines how literary texts change through translations, adaptations, and/or intertextualities, and considers circulation, that is, movements of both people and text, the key force that generates these changes. While world literature often focuses on how these texts change after they circulate outside their source culture, my article focuses on Arabic literature as a case study to demonstrate how circulations of the past have shaped our current understandings of source literatures. The world literature scholarship should not limit itself to studying how particular texts transform after they leave their source culture. I thus call for a shift from an almost exclusive focus on text in the world literature field to more theoretical reflections on source cultures to which these texts belong. Concepts and periods of source literatures, such as Arabic literature, also need a reframing that undermines nationalistic frameworks of the earlier scholarship to further reveal that cultural circulation shape not only texts of source cultures, but also source cultures themselves, including that of Arabic literature. Thank you so much. Any point?